My name is Sandra Madison. I'm 35 years old, and last week, at a black tie gala downtown, my former best friend, my maid of honor, the woman who once zipped up my wedding dress with tears in her eyes, saw me across the ballroom and froze like she'd seen a ghost. Her champagne glass trembled. Her fake laugh died in her throat. And in that single, loaded second, I knew she thought I was there to destroy her. If you've ever been betrayed by the person you trusted most, the one you'd have gone to war for, hit that subscribe button. You're not alone. And this story, it's for you. Because the moment she saw me, the past crashed into both of us like a slow-motion car wreck. The way her smile faded told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't changed. Not even a flicker of remorse in her eyes. Just fear. Fear that I had finally come to take back what she stole. But I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to cry. I didn't need to cause a scene at the gala. Not anymore. Because I'd already won. I just stood there, head high, in a gown that made every woman stare and every man rethink his relationship. I lifted my champagne flute, gave her the faintest nod, and watched her mask of confidence collapse in real time. She gripped her husband's arm like a lifeline. My husband. The man she married 1 year after ripping him from my life. But here's the thing. They never saw what happened next. The moment that crushed me, rewired me, and ultimately rebuilt me didn't begin at a gala. It began on a warm spring afternoon, 3 years ago, in a bridal suite filled with blush silk, nervous giggles, and lies I didn't know were being whispered behind my back. It began the morning of my wedding. I still remember the smell of gardenias in the air, the soft hum of hairspray, the way Alyssa, my best friend of 20 years, twirled in her bridesmaid robe and joked that she should have worn white instead. I laughed. God, I laughed. Because who would ever think she meant it? She helped me into my dress. She cried when I slipped on my veil. And when I told her I felt like the luckiest woman alive, she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You are." The lies were already stitched into the lace of that morning. I didn't know it then, but while I was walking down the aisle, Alyssa had already been in my husband's bed. While I was writing vows, they were writing text messages. While I was dreaming of forever, they were calculating when to take it from me. And the thing that hurts most? I saw signs, tiny ones. Flickers of hesitation when I kissed him. Lingering glances when they thought I wasn't looking. An inside joke I wasn't in on. But I shoved them away like flies. Because love is blind, they say. But what they don't tell you is, betrayal is invisible until it cuts you open. I didn't find out right away. No, they were careful. They were smart. It was almost a year later, after a brutal stretch of cold shoulders, late nights, and stomach aches I couldn't explain, that I found the message. A single message. Hidden deep in a folder on his laptop labeled Invoices. It wasn't even poetic. Just a line that read, "She doesn't suspect a thing. Let's book the same cabin again." And her name. Alyssa. Right there, like a knife slipped under my skin. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I just sat there, staring at the screen, feeling every bone in my body go cold. Because betrayal doesn't hit you like thunder. It seeps in like poison. Quiet. Paralyzing. Permanent. But the worst part? They didn't even have the decency to lie well. When I confronted them, they didn't cry. They didn't deny it. My husband just looked at the floor like a boy caught stealing. And Alyssa? She smirked. She smirked. "I didn't steal him," she said. "You just didn't know how to keep him." That's when I realized this wasn't just betrayal. This was sport. This was conquest. This was a woman who'd been waiting in the wings for years, ready to take the stage the second I faltered. And I faltered. I broke. For a while, I disappeared. I moved back into my childhood bedroom. I stopped answering calls. I lost 15 pounds from forgetting to eat. I wasn't just grieving a marriage. I was grieving the death of the version of me who believed in loyalty. But something strange happens when you hit rock bottom. You stop apologizing. you stop explaining yourself. And if you're lucky, you start rebuilding with teeth. Before everything fell apart, I lived a life that most people would have called ordinary. I wasn't chasing headlines or building empires. I was building something quieter, something that took patience, love, and consistency. I taught 4th grade at a public elementary school on the east side of Milwaukee, the same school I once attended as a child. My days were filled with glue sticks, misspelled essays, and lunchbox negotiations. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and it was mine. I believed in routines, grocery runs on Sundays, morning coffee brewed at 6:45 sharp, date nights every other Friday, texts to my mom just to say I love you. I didn't need fireworks, I just needed peace. I worked hard to build it, piece by piece. And for a while, I thought I had. My husband, Derek, was the kind of man who made people feel safe. He worked in architecture, wore clean shirts with rolled sleeves, and kissed my forehead like he meant it. He didn't speak much, but when he did, people listened. And when he laughed, God, when he laughed, it made me feel like I was home. Then there was Alyssa, my best friend since sophomore year of high school. We met in a photography class we both hated. She was loud, sarcastic, and dazzling in the way some women are born knowing how to be. I was softer, more measured. But she pulled me out of my shell, and I gave her a place to rest when the world was too harsh. Over time, she became part of my family. She came to Christmas dinner. She helped me move apartments. She was the one who held my hand when my dad passed away. When Derek and I got engaged, I never even asked. I just told her she was going to be my maid of honor. She cried like I'd proposed to her. But looking back now, I see it. The way she always made subtle jabs when Derek complimented me. The way she'd say, "I don't know how you do it, Sandra. I'd go crazy in a routine like yours." Or how she always offered to help him pick something out whenever gift-giving season rolled around. They were small things, harmless on the surface. But betrayal never starts big. It starts as a whisper, a glance, a slow erosion of respect. There was a night, months before the wedding, when I got food poisoning and had to cancel dinner with Derek. Alyssa just happened to be in the neighborhood and kindly offered to keep him company so he wouldn't eat alone. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I even thanked her. God, I thanked her. Because I trusted her with my life, with my secrets, with the man I thought would grow old beside me. But what I didn't realize is that while I was building a life of loyalty and quiet devotion, she was looking for something shinier. Alyssa always had a flair for performance. She once cried her way out of a speeding ticket and posted about it like it was a badge of honor. She called it main character energy. I called it manipulation. Still, I never judged her. I thought we were simply different. I valued substance. She valued sparkle. But deep down, I believed we balanced each other out. What I didn't understand was that my stability made her feel small. And instead of admiring it, she wanted to dismantle it. There were warning signs with Derek, too. Subtle shifts. The way he'd go quiet when I talked about school. How he stopped asking about my lesson plans or the funny things my students said. Once, I surprised him at his office with his favorite lunch, and he looked annoyed. "I'm in the middle of something," he said, barely looking up. I brushed it off as stress. Everyone gets busy. Everyone has off days. But the warmth was fading. The man who used to write me little notes and tuck them in my coat pocket had become someone I had to remind to look me in the eye. And I blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't exciting enough. Maybe I'd become too predictable. Maybe I'd outlived my charm. I didn't realize that the rot wasn't coming from me. It was growing in the dark space between them. Still, I carried on. Because that's what I do. I carry on. I planned the wedding with meticulous care. I pressed my grandmother's lace into my veil. I wrote vows that took me weeks to get right. I focused on the good, the hopeful, the beautiful. And I prayed the rest away. I remember one night, maybe a month before the wedding, when Alyssa and I stayed up late drinking wine and stuffing welcome bags for the guests. She asked me, casually, if I ever worried about forever. If I ever thought about what I might be missing out on. I laughed. No, I said. This is everything I want. She didn't say anything. Just sipped her wine and stared out the window like she knew something I didn't. I should have asked what she was thinking. I should have asked why she suddenly seemed so restless in a life I thought we both admired. But I didn't. Because when you love someone, really love them, you don't interrogate every silence. You fill in the gaps with grace. I didn't know that grace would be weaponized against me. At school, I remained the steady one. The teacher who remembered every kid's birthday. The one who kept granola bars in her desk drawer for hungry students. I stayed late to help the ones who struggled. I believed every child had something good in them if someone just looked closely enough. That's who I was. And when the world fell apart, that's who I had to remember to return to. Because while Alyssa chased applause and Derek chased temptation, I chased healing. I chased dignity. I chased the version of myself that could walk through fire without burning to ash. I wasn't perfect. I made mistakes. I trusted too easily. I saw people for who I hoped they'd be, not who they were. But I never lied. I never strayed. I never took more than I gave. And in a world that celebrates flashover foundation, I became invisible. Until the night I decided I wouldn't be anymore. It happened in the most public, humiliating way possible. A rooftop party in the historic Third Ward. One of those curated, glittering social nights full of string lights, overpriced wine, and couples who act happier than they are. It was a post-wedding mixer for one of Derek's colleagues, and I hadn't wanted to go. But Alyssa insisted. You never come to these anymore, she'd said, draping herself across my couch like she belonged there. You're a wife now. Come act like it. That was her tone, teasing, dismissive, with a bite of something beneath it I didn't want to name yet. So I said yes. I pulled out my navy dress with the low back. I curled my hair. I told myself everything was fine. It wasn't. From the moment we arrived, something felt off. People looked at me strangely. Some too kindly, like I was fragile. Others with pity hidden behind forced smiles. Derek was distant again, barely touching me, introducing me like a colleague instead of a wife. And Alyssa? She was radiant, flushed cheeks, a gold dress just short enough to turn heads, and always by his side. When we sat, she claimed the seat between us. She laughed a little too loud at his jokes, poured him wine without asking, brushed something imaginary off his lapel. And I watched it all, nausea building in my chest, thinking maybe I was imagining it, that maybe I was being dramatic, insecure, until it wasn't imaginary anymore. We were halfway through the evening when a woman, a stranger, leaned in toward me, her voice dipped in uncomfortable sympathy. I'm so sorry, she said. I just want you to know you didn't deserve that. I blinked. Didn't deserve what? Her face fell. Her eyes widened, like she realized she'd made a mistake. Oh, I thought you knew. Knew what? And then her gaze darted toward Alyssa and Derek, standing together across the patio, too close, talking like no one else existed. It was a moment I can't unsee. He reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, and she leaned into it. Not playfully, not jokingly, intimately, like lovers. My stomach flipped. My chest tightened. Every voice in the room faded into static. I rose to my feet without thinking, moving toward them like I was in a dream. Sandra! Alyssa chirped, spinning around to face me. There you are! She hugged me like we were still friends. Like my world wasn't caving in under the weight of a single glance. Derek looked at me like I was the interruption, like I'd ruined a moment that didn't belong to me. That's when I knew. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This had been going on behind my back for God knows how long, and the worst part? They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Later that night, when we got home, I tried to confront Derek. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But my voice came out like a whisper. Are you in love with her? He didn't answer. Are you sleeping with her? Silence. Just say it, I begged. Say it to my face. He looked at me, not with guilt, not with remorse, with indifference. It just happened, he said. I let out a laugh that cracked like glass. Things like that don't just happen, Derek. You don't trip and fall into my best friend. Still, he wouldn't look at me, wouldn't touch me, wouldn't fight for me. That's when I realized he was already gone. And the woman who helped zip up my wedding dress had been unzipping my marriage ever since. The next day, I got a text from Alyssa. A single message. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I hope someday you understand. No apology, no accountability, just the classic selfish twist, the kind of message that asks me to do the emotional labor of forgiving her. I didn't reply, because there's nothing left to say when someone digs a knife into your back and calls it love. The days that followed were a blur of numbness. I didn't go to work. I didn't eat. I lay on the floor of our guest room staring at the ceiling fan, watching it spin like the thoughts I couldn't quiet. I kept thinking about the day I introduced them. We were 26. I had just started dating Derek. He came to our apartment to pick me up for dinner, and Alyssa happened to be there. I remember her teasing me afterward. He's hot, she said, eyes gleaming. Don't let him see you're crazy too soon. I laughed. She laughed. And now, years later, that joke felt like a prophecy. The next few weeks were filled with the kind of silent cruelty only people who once loved each other can deliver. Derek stayed late at the office every night. Alyssa vanished from my life entirely, like she'd deleted the version of me that used to matter to her. But the final blow? It came in the form of a wedding invitation, delivered to my mailbox like a grenade. Alyssa and Derek request the honor of your presence. I didn't even read the rest. My fingers trembled as I held the ivory cardstock embossed in gold, like it was something sacred. But it wasn't. It was a monument to their audacity, a celebration of their betrayal, and they sent it to me. To me. I threw it in the trash, then I pulled it back out, then I burned it. I watched the edges curl, blacken, turn to ash, just like everything they'd touched in my life. That was the moment something shifted inside me. The pain calcified into resolve. The grief hardened into focus. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to chase. I wasn't going to fall apart quietly while they toasted to their happy ending. If they thought they'd broken me, they were wrong. They'd built something instead. Something they didn't see coming. I didn't retaliate. Not publicly. Not privately. Not yet. While they planned a wedding, I planned my exit. The day I found the invitation burning in my sink, I made myself a promise. I would never let them see me broken again. No more tears they could feed off. No more texts to Alyssa that would end with me staring at a red receipt and no reply. No more late-night questions to Derek that ended in silence. I stopped trying to understand why. That was their burden now. Mine was simple. Rebuild. Quietly. With precision. The first step was the house. Legally, our names were both on the deed, but the down payment came from my inheritance, money left to me by my father, money I'd trusted to invest in our future. Derek didn't expect me to fight for it. He assumed I'd leave it behind, like a woman too heartbroken to care. But I had already spoken to a lawyer before I packed a single box. I brought every receipt, every statement, every transfer. I didn't cry in her office. I didn't even flinch. I let the facts speak for themselves. She told me it was rare to see someone come in so prepared. "What do you want, Sandra?" she asked. "Fairness," I said, and silence. So while Derek picked out floral arrangements and booked a DJ for his next wedding, I moved forward without noise. No shouting matches, no late-night door knocks. Just paperwork and signatures and court filings he didn't realize were in motion until they arrived certified on his desk. By the time he read the letter from my attorney, the property had already been appraised, the equity split, and a notice of sale filed with the city. I gave him a timeline. 3 weeks. Then the keys were mine. He tried to call. I didn't answer. Let him explain that to Alyssa, in between seating charts and wine tastings. Next came my job. I loved teaching, but I was burned out. I'd given so much of myself, to my students, to my marriage, to my friendships, that I barely recognized who I was outside of service. So when the district opened up internal leadership grants for community pilot programs, I applied. I didn't tell anyone, not even my closest colleague. I worked on the proposal every night. I studied school funding models, student support systems, trauma-informed care. I wasn't just trying to get promoted. I was trying to build something that couldn't be taken from me, something no one else could wear like a stolen dress. When the call came that my program had been approved, I stood in my kitchen barefoot, holding the phone with one hand and a cup of tea in the other. "Ms. Madison," the voice on the line said, "we'd like you to lead the district initiative starting this fall." It didn't come with press or applause. Just quiet validation that I wasn't just surviving, I was becoming something more. Then I got a new phone number. Deleted every photo, every contact that didn't serve my peace. I stopped checking their social media. I stopped asking mutual friends for updates. I stopped imagining what I would say if I ever saw them again. Instead, I ran. Every morning, rain or shine, 5 miles before sunrise. Not to punish myself, but to feel my breath again. To remember what it meant to belong to my own body. The anger didn't vanish, but it became something sharper, something useful. A tool, not a wound. And then, I started writing. Not revenge letters, not messages I'd never send, but stories, essays, journal entries. Every morning after my run, I'd sit with coffee and write down one truth I'd never spoken aloud. Some of them hurt, some made me laugh, but all of them reminded me that my voice still worked, that it still mattered. Eventually, a colleague of mine, the art teacher, a sweet woman named Patrice, read one of my pieces and said, "You should submit this somewhere. People need to hear this." So I did, under a pen name, and the first one went viral. Not because I advertised it, not because I begged for attention, but because pain, when told honestly, has a way of echoing inside people who thought they were alone. Emails came in from strangers. "You told my story. I left him after reading this. Thank you." Their wedding came and went with zero impact on my life. I didn't stalk the photos. I didn't watch her walk down the aisle in some designer dress I was supposed to gush over. Instead, I bought myself a simple gold ring, a gift to the woman who'd clawed her way back from ashes without screaming. I wore it on my right hand. Because sometimes, the longest commitment we forget to make is to ourselves. But the moment that sealed it, the one that planted the seed of poetic justice, came a few months later. Alyssa showed up at my school. Not for me. She was dropping off her niece for the first day of classes. And I happened to be walking the halls with a clipboard, finalizing rosters. We locked eyes from across the front office. She froze. I didn't. I smiled. A real one. "Hi, Alyssa," I said. Calm, steady, not a tremor in my voice. She tried to mask her surprise. "Oh, wow. I didn't realize you worked here." "I don't just work here," I said. "I run the new program." Her eyes flicked to the badge around my neck, then to the school counselor who approached me seconds later and said, "Ms. Madison, your meeting with the board is ready." I excused myself without another glance. That moment wasn't revenge. It was rehearsal, because something else was coming. Something bigger. I didn't know when or how, but I knew this. When you choose dignity over drama, the universe sharpens your timing. The revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. It came wrapped in velvet gloves and sealed with an RSVP. 6 months after Alyssa dropped off her niece at my school. 6 months after our eyes met and hers flickered with something between shame and recognition, an invitation arrived in my mailbox. It wasn't theirs. It was for the Milwaukee Women in Leadership Gala, an annual black tie event recognizing leaders in education, community growth, and civic impact. I'd been nominated quietly by a board member who'd read my published work and followed the success of my school program. He told me over coffee one morning, almost casually, "I think people should know what you've done," he said. "You belong in that room." For a moment, I hesitated. I didn't need applause. I wasn't doing this for recognition. But then I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who swallowed her hurt in silence while her best friend laughed beside her husband. And I decided to go. Not for them. For her. For me. I chose my dress carefully. Not flashy. Not trendy. Just unforgettable. A deep emerald satin, draped off the shoulder, tailored to my body like it had been waiting for this moment. My hair was swept into a low chignon, a single diamond pin tucked behind my ear. One I'd bought myself from the bonus I earned writing under my pen name. When I walked into that ballroom, heads turned. I didn't force it. I didn't smile too wide. I simply existed, fully, in a space they thought I'd never occupy again. And that's when I saw her, Alyssa, standing near the floral archway, wrapped in blush chiffon, still posing like every room was a spotlight. But this time, the spotlight wasn't hers. She turned and froze. Her smile faltered. Her body stiffened. For a second, I thought she might pretend she didn't recognize me. But then her gaze dropped, not to the floor, but to the man standing beside her, Derek. Same tailored suit, same cautious eyes. But something about him had dulled. The edge was gone. The charm was hollow. They had come as guests. I had come as the guest of honor. Because this year, the board had chosen me for the Community Impact Award, a recognition not just of my leadership, but of the ripple effect my work had created across the district. It was the first time they'd ever given the award to someone under 40, and the committee chair had asked me to give a speech. I hadn't told anyone, not my coworkers, not even my mother. I wanted the moment to arrive on its own, not to be staged, not to be inflated, just to be. When they announced my name, the applause was immediate and sincere. And as I took the stage, I locked eyes with them. They were seated near the center, barely 20 feet from the podium. I didn't acknowledge them directly. I didn't need to, but as I adjusted the mic and looked out over the crowd, I let my voice carry not just truth, but grace. I used to think heartbreak was the end of something, I said. But it's not. It's the beginning of clarity, of learning to build a life not on illusion, but on values. I paused. In education, we tell our students to learn from their mistakes, but we don't talk enough about learning from our pain. Pain teaches you who you are and who you're not. Pain strips away the noise until you hear your own voice again. There was a silence that filled the room, thick with recognition. And if you listen closely, I said, you find power in places you thought were broken. The standing ovation that followed was not just for my words. It was for my survival. I stepped down from the stage, heart pounding. Not from nerves, but from the quiet, undeniable truth that I had taken back every piece of myself they tried to erase. I didn't go to their table. I didn't wave. I let them sit there and witness what they'd lost. Not just me, but the version of themselves that could have been part of something good, something lasting. Instead, they bet on glitter. And glitter washes off. But truth? That stays. I was speaking with one of the event organizers when Alyssa approached. She waited until I was alone, eyes glassy with something she was trying to contain. Pride? Envy? Regret? Even she didn't know. "Sandra," she said softly. "That was beautiful." I turned to her slowly, tilting my head. "Thank you." A pause. "I didn't know you'd be here," she added, voice tight. "I was invited." She tried to smile. "You always had a way with words." There was a time that would have hurt. That backhanded compliment, wrapped in thinly veiled surprise that I'd risen from the wreckage. But not now. Now I only saw the cracks in her mask. She gestured toward Derek, who stood a few feet away, pretending not to watch us. "We didn't know you were doing all of this," I gave a small, elegant shrug. You didn't ask. And with that, I excused myself. I didn't need to stay for the after party. I didn't need to linger and gloat. My presence had already done the work. But as I walked past Derek, he looked at me. Really looked. And for the first time in years, there was no arrogance. No silence. No edge. Just emptiness. He opened his mouth as if to say something. I didn't give him the chance. I simply walked by. And that, truly, was the revenge. Not ruining them, not destroying them, but becoming someone they could no longer reach. They thought they'd written my ending, but I rewrote the whole book. The last time I stood in the same room as both of them, I had no power. They were the center of everything. The glowing newlyweds, all whispers and shared glances. I was the leftover, the discarded, the one who didn't know how to keep him, as Alyssa once smirked. But that night, in the grand hall of the Milwaukee Gala, the script flipped. I hadn't planned it that way. I hadn't come to confront anyone. I came to stand in my own light. But sometimes, justice doesn't need a plan. It just needs presence. After my speech, I returned to my table to find a line of well-wishers forming. Teachers, board members, women I admired, men who once overlooked me. They all wanted a moment, a photo, a word of thanks. It felt surreal, like I had become someone I used to only imagine. Respected, not for who I was to someone else, but for what I'd built alone. That's when I felt it. Eyes on me. I turned, and there they were, Alyssa and Derek, standing just behind the crowd, trying to look casual, but visibly unraveling. Their smiles were thinner now, strained. Alyssa clutched her wine glass like a lifeline, while Derek stood with his hands shoved in his pockets, shifting his weight, trying to act like he wasn't watching every move I made. But the room saw them, and that was the shift. For the first time, I wasn't the woman scorned. I was the woman admired. A committee member approached me, a man I barely knew but who had just shaken my hand minutes earlier. He leaned in, glancing toward Alyssa. "Isn't that the woman from that scandal last year?" he asked under his breath. "The one who married your ex?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The look on my face, calm, unbothered, said more than words could. Alyssa saw the interaction. She saw the whisper, and I watched something flicker across her face. Not anger, not even jealousy. Exposure. The golden girl mask was slipping. Still, she pushed forward. I saw her coming, weaving past tables with that signature sway, the one she always used to make entrances feel cinematic. But the effect was lost now. It felt hollow, performed. She reached me as the crowd began to disperse. Her smile was tight. "Hey," she said, voice forced bright. "Do you have a second?" I took a slow sip of my champagne, then nodded graciously. We stepped aside to the edge of the room, near a marble column where the string quartet was softly playing something classical. I didn't rush. I didn't speak. I let the silence fill the space between us. She fiddled with her bracelet. Her voice dropped. "I know tonight wasn't what you expected. I mean, I didn't expect to see you here either." I raised an eyebrow. "You didn't expect the woman nominated for the Community Impact Award to be present at the gala honoring her?" She blinked. "I didn't mean it like that." I smiled faintly. "I know exactly how you meant it." She laughed awkwardly. "You've always been so composed. It's intimidating." That's when I knew she was spiraling. Alyssa never admitted feeling less than. She lived to be envied. "What do you want, Alyssa?" I asked softly. She looked around, as if hoping no one was watching, but of course they were. People always watch a downfall, especially one dressed in blush chiffon and gilt. "I guess I just wanted to say, I'm happy for you." I tilted my head. "You're happy for me?" "Yes." I paused for a beat. "Funny. I remember saying the same thing to you. On my wedding day. You helped me into my dress. You held my bouquet. You cried like you meant it. And later, when you stole my husband, I got a text that said, I hope someday you understand. Her face drained. You told me I didn't know how to keep him. Do you remember that? She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand, gently. You don't need to say anything, I said. I'm not angry anymore. She stared at me, confused. I'm not here to fight, Alyssa. I'm not here to make a scene. I've moved on. I've built something real. You don't need to validate that. I don't need your blessing. I didn't think you'd ever come back, she said quietly. I never left, I replied. You just stopped looking. Behind her, Derek had approached. Of course he had. He always followed her lead. Sandra, he said, voice low. I turned to him. There was no hate left in me, just clarity. Derek. He looked at me like a man who just realized the house he walked out of was made of gold. Like a man who'd chosen temporary applause over long-term grace. His eyes flicked to my dress, my poise, the people still watching me. I didn't know you'd be speaking tonight, he said. No one ever knows what the quiet woman's capable of, I said, with a softness that cut deeper than anger ever could. His jaw clenched. He nodded once. That was all he had left. And just like that, the moment was over. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need to destroy them. I'd already done the one thing they never expected. I forgave myself. And in doing that, I erased any control they ever had over me. As I walked away, the string quartet shifted into something light, something celebratory. I returned to my table, to my glass of champagne, to my peace. Behind me, I heard nothing. No footsteps, no words, just silence. And for the first time, it belonged to them. Some endings don't need announcements. They don't come with slamming doors or screaming matches or last words. Sometimes, they arrive like morning light. Soft, unapologetic. Quietly claiming space that once belonged to darkness. The gala came and went. The emails poured in. Congratulations. Invitations. A few job offers I never expected. And for once, I didn't rush to respond. I just let the silence stretch. Let it breathe. A week later, I returned to the lake. Lake Michigan had always been my place. The stretch of shoreline where I used to go after bad days at school, or moments when I felt like I was vanishing in someone else's life. I hadn't been there since the divorce. Maybe I didn't want to remember who I used to be, but that morning, I went. No makeup, no gown. Just me, in jeans, a scarf, and a thermos of coffee. I walked the pier slowly, feeling the cold kiss of autumn in the air. The water was still, flat as glass, a sky so open it almost made you feel exposed. I sat on a bench and pulled out the letter. It had been sitting in a drawer for over a year, sealed in an envelope I never planned to mail. Dear Alyssa, it began. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I do. It wasn't a letter to heal her. It was to release myself. A written marker that said, I'm done carrying your choices in my bones. The letter was short, 3 paragraphs, just enough to unhook the anchor that had kept me tied to a version of myself that no longer existed. I didn't read it again. Instead, I lit a match. The flame took fast, curling the paper into soft ash. I let the wind take the pieces, watched them scatter over the lake, and disappear into the water like they never belonged on land in the first place. And that was it. That was the ending. Not a confrontation, not a breakdown, just a choice. My choice. That afternoon, I stopped by the school. Not to work, but to walk the halls while the classrooms were still echoing with laughter. I looked at the photos on the walls, the artwork, the sticky fingerprints on the stair rails. These were the things I'd saved, the life I'd rebuilt. Later that week, my editor emailed to tell me a major publisher was interested in turning my essays into a book. Stories about healing from betrayal are everywhere, she wrote. But yours? Yours has clarity, stillness. It's rare. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone to share the news right away. I just sat with it, like a secret I wasn't ready to let the world hold yet. That night, I made dinner for myself. Real dinner. Music playing, wine breathing, candles lit. Not for a guest. Just for me. I ate slowly, mindfully. It hit me sometime between the second bite and the first sip of wine. I was no longer waiting for anything. Not a text, not an apology, not an explanation, not a man to come home, not a friend to circle back, not a version of myself I had to earn. I was here, whole. The wedding ring I once wore had long been sold. I used the money to take a trip by myself the previous summer, to Oregon's coast, where cliffs met ocean in a wild, sacred kind of way. On the last day of that trip, I bought a small silver necklace from a roadside artist. It had one word etched into it: enough. I wore it now as I stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing my glass. The moon hung low in the sky, quiet, bright, unbothered. Alyssa and Derek never reached out again. Last I heard, through someone else, someone distant, they'd moved out of the city, some small suburb with a newer house, newer circle of friends, newer facade. People like that rarely stay still for long. They confuse motion with redemption. But I didn't need the details. Let them spin their new story. Let them tell themselves whatever version they could live with. I had no interest in correcting it. Because real peace? It's not the absence of conflict. It's the absence of need. The need to be seen, to be vindicated, to be chosen. When all of that fades, what's left is you. And if you've done the work, if you've walked through the fire without becoming flame, then who you are in that silence will be enough, more than enough. The next morning, I went for a run along the lakefront. Same trail I used to take when I was rebuilding. Only this time, it didn't feel like survival. It felt like rhythm, like breath, like forward. I passed a man walking his dog who nodded and said, "Hey, you're the woman from the gala, right?" That speech was something else. I smiled. "Thank you." He kept walking. So did I. Not toward revenge, not toward applause, just onward. And that's how it ends. Not with a slam or a scream or a shattered glass, but with a woman standing still in her own skin, knowing she has nothing to prove and everything to live for. The kind of ending that isn't really an ending at all, just the start of something honest.